A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends. Welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And A Course in What is a free weekly podcast that comes out every Tuesday. So thank you so much for joining me today. We are on chapter 3 in the text, The Innocent Perception, section 5, Beyond Perception. And let's just jump right into reading this section. Paragraph 1, sentence 1. I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. Boy, what a mouthful. What a sentence to start off with. So ability, we'll break it down here. Ability is a word associated with perception or this realm of dualism. Whatever abilities we have now, our abilities to make things, including this body and the entire world, are only shadows, he's saying, of our real strength, that creative power of our mind. And that's our mind joined with God in his love. So he's telling us that those abilities, those things we've made, will pale in comparison to what love will create. The last part of this sentence, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation, is telling us that perception is really judgment. And we don't really think about it that way. But there can be no judgment in oneness with God. What is there to judge in oneness? There can only be judgment once you have separated and your mind becomes split. Then, as we've mentioned in the last podcast episode, there becomes a perceiver and a perceived. There are now things and other people outside of us. So when we now look out into the world from our separated bodies, from that perception, we feel naturally that we're lacking in something because now there's things outside of us that we aren't, that we don't have. Whereas in oneness, we are one. Therefore, there can be no perception of lack. 2, no one has been sure of anything since. So no one has been sure of anything since the separation. Only God is sure. Only our reality as one with him is certain. Everything we made after that tiny mad idea, as the Course calls it, is a dream. And there's no certainty in a dream. Everything is open to interpretation. 3, I have also made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. So this is contrasting Christianity, which focuses on the crucifixion. It's all about the sacrifice and how Jesus died for our sins. Here, he's saying that he has made it clear that the resurrection was the most important part of that whole event. He's referencing actually the first section of this chapter. If you want to turn back to page 36, in the very first section, it was so many podcast episodes ago. If you've been following this podcast, you may remember that this section started out talking about the crucifixion and the resurrection. We're just going through it so slowly that it seems like forever ago. You may have forgotten. But in that second sentence of the first paragraph, it says, the crucifixion did not establish the atonement. The resurrection did. And then he goes on to say, many sincere Christians have misunderstood this. So he's touching on that same idea here. The resurrection, from the Course's point of view, is the resurrection of the ego thought system, the transcendence of the belief in separation. That's our resurrection. So he's telling us that the resurrection from the ego is the means for the return to knowledge. And again, knowledge is a word synonymous with oneness. So the way that we Become one again is obviously to resurrect from the ego thought system. And all of that was accomplished, he says, by the union of my will with the Father's. All that was accomplished because I returned my mind back to God. I restored it to its rightful place. And that rightful place is, as this title of this section, is beyond perception. That's oneness. 4. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. So he's going to clarify these terms make and create, even though I've already mentioned them and defined them in numerous other podcast episodes. It's the first time that he's going to clarify them as he does. Paragraph 2, sentence 1. Since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. So in this world, we use those words interchangeably, but he's very clear that they're not the same. In fact, they're wildly different. 2, when you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. So this harkens back to what I was saying, that once we view ourselves as separate in separate bodies, we will naturally perceive lack. You can only perceive lack if you perceive yourself as a body. To make, then, using that word, is to make something you perceive that you need. And that can only be ego. Everything here in this dream is a perceived need. It's a need to separate from God. It's a need to keep our mind rooted in the physical world. 3, anything made for a specific purpose has no true generalizability. So again, everything in this world is specific. Just look outside of yourself, wherever you're sitting, or if you're in the car driving, and you see that everything outside of you is specific. It has a specific function in this world. 4, when you make something to fulfill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. So anytime we feel lack, we are sustaining the dream of separation. And this doesn't mean that if we have a physical lack, we shouldn't fill it, obviously. If we need food, we should eat. If we need clothes, we should buy them. We can't all run around naked. We need air, water, clothing, shelter, a means of transportation. In today's society, we need cell phones and all of those modern technologies, the internet. Obviously, there are people who live without them, but these are our perceived needs. But what I think he's saying is that while we fill those perceived lacks, those needs, we need to keep in the back of our mind the reality of what's really going on here. The insanity of it all, that this isn't our real home, that we are not separate, that it's just a dream. And that's all you really need to do. You don't need to stop doing what you're doing, whatever you feel guided and moved to do. But we're just asked to keep in the back of our mind the reality. And, talking about these perceived needs, there are degrees within this. There are obviously healthy needs like good food and clean water. And there are also perceived lacks like an addict who thinks he can't live without heroin or alcohol. And when we think that, we're buying into this whole ego's thought system that we're guilty people who have kicked God out, and now we better fill that perceived lack, that need, before he finds us and fills it with his punishment. That's the whole unconscious dynamic of that sin, guilt, and fear, the ego's unholy trinity that's occurring in our ego thought system. That's the conflict in our mind. 5, the ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. So I'm not 100% sure what this refers to. It could refer to just the ingenious nature of the ego to come up with as many thought systems of justification as there are people. Our ego can be very smart. It can be very insidious and tricky. Or it could mean that we've come up with all kinds of systems of thought like religion and politics and psychology, philosophy, science, and so forth. And then he goes on to say in sentence 6, none of them is creative. So this could read, none of them is of God, meaning they are all based in the dream. Creation, love, is of God. Again, this doesn't mean that all of these things can't be helpful. So my work would fall right in line with this idea. Hypnotherapy isn't needed, though, for a healed mind. But all of these thought systems, when surrendered to the Holy Spirit, they can be tools to help us heal our mind, to help us awaken from the dream. He's talking again about the metaphysical nature, that nothing we make in this dream is real in the realest sense of the word. It's all just a reflection, or it's a blatant lie. Again, our abilities are not our real strength. 7, inventiveness is wasted effort, even in its most ingenious form. Oh boy, so here he's saying that anything we invent is a wasted effort, no matter how clever we think it is. Because ultimately, all of this separation, all of this dream is just wasted effort. It's an idea that isn't correct. But again, you know what I'm going to say. Since we've bought into this idea, since we think we are in the dream, it serves a very important purpose. But the original idea of separation is a wasted effort, he's telling us. That's some serious stuff. 8, the highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. So on some level, this sentence is kind of comforting, knowing that no matter what we make in this world, it's not worthy of us, that we're worthy of greater things and experiences. And this also goes back to that first sentence, that abilities are only shadows of your real strength. This week, let's look at the reality with a capital R of what's going on, what everyone, including ourselves, is buying into. And let's not buy into it on some level in our mind. Let's see the truth. Let's see all that we've made as a shadow of our real strength. And what I hear him saying is that we have so much untapped potential. So let's join our mind with God and see that we are already full, that we have no true lack. And that is true abundance. That's what creates a different experience, a different life, and even a different world. So we're going to stop there for today, just short and sweet today, and continue on in the next podcast episode. So if you would like to stay in touch with me, I would love that. If you're on Facebook, I am at facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy. And we also have a Facebook page for this podcast. It's /A Course in What. And I'm also on Twitter at Cynthia S. Morgan. And you can write to me at acourseinwhat@gmail.com. Those are just a number of ways to introduce yourself, to ask a question, to share on the podcast, to make a comment. I always love hearing from you guys. And if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.